Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something a bit different, stripping away all the noise, the hype, and just focusing purely on foundational text. We had a listener share some key excerpts from the Avalanche, the AVAX Whitepaper, sourced via whitepaper.io, and it felt like the perfect chance to, cut past all the market talk and just look at the blueprints. Okay, so let's unpack this. When a project puts out its sounding documents, its white paper, it's really articulating its core mission, right? It's defining the problems it thinks it's uniquely set up to solve. So our mission here is simply to understand, what is Avalanche actually built to do, strictly based on its own words? What were those specific technical goals from day one?
Yeah, this is a great exercise. It's more than just, reading a mission statement aloud. It's about deconstruction. We're trying to isolate the core language, the specific words, adjectives, nouns they chose, to really grasp the why behind the tech. Looking at these initial concepts helps us understand the specific landscape they were entering and what gaps they aimed to fill.
Okay, and that foundation, it seems, starts right at the very beginning. The source material sets the identity immediately. It defines Avalanche as an open source platform.
And that phrase, open source, it's crucial, often kind of underestimated, I think. In finance, especially digital finance, transparency is basically the entry ticket for trust. If you're building infrastructure for potentially global capital, the code running it just has to be open, accessible. Subject to public scrutiny, it signals this isn't some proprietary black box. It's more like a public utility meant for community validation, contribution even.
Right. So it's infrastructure that others are meant to inspect, maybe build upon. That really changes the risk calculation for anyone deciding to use it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If the platform is supposed to host genuinely autonomous systems, then the code itself needs to be, transparently reviewable at the very least.
Precisely. And that really informs everything else they set out to do. They're building a shared foundation, not some closed-off product.
Okay, so that leads us directly into the core objectives laid out in the white paper. Those three sort of huge technical shifts this platform is supposedly designed for. The first one listed is launching highly decentralized applications. Now, we hear decentralized applications or dApps all the time, constantly. But why add the qualifier highly? Why emphasize the degree? I mean, doesn't decentralized kind of already imply that?
Well, that's a really powerful distinction they're making there, because decentralized in this industry, it's become more of a spectrum, not really a binary yes-no thing. You could have a chain where, say, 3 entities control 90% of the nodes, and they might still call it decentralized. When Avalanche's white paper explicitly says highly decentralized, it implies a really uncompromising commitment to security against collusion, maximum censorship resistance, things like that. It suggests they're aiming for a much, much broader distribution of validators, of stake, than maybe what's typical. And this means the system has to keep up its consensus speed, its transaction finality, network stability, even with potentially thousands of individual independent participants all validating transactions.
Hang on, but if you push for maximum decentralization like that, doesn't that almost always add complexity? Doesn't that often slow things down, reduce throughput, just because of all the communication needed between all those nodes? Isn't that usually the trade-off you face in distributed systems?
It is the traditional trade-off, absolutely. And that's precisely why this technical goal is so ambitious. To actually maintain all 3 core properties, decentralization, security, and scalability, you need a fundamental shift, a different approach to the consensus mechanism itself, moving away from maybe older, slower models. By stating highly decentralized, they're basically staking a claim. They're saying they believe their unique consensus approach can handle this really tough engineering challenge, where maybe others would compromise on decentralization to get speed.
Okay, so that word highly isn't just fluff. It's their promise, their design goal, to prioritize robustness above almost everything else, making the apps built on it genuinely resilient, sovereign once they're out there.
Exactly. It's fundamentally about guaranteeing that the rules baked into the code are the final rules, regardless of, external political pressure or corporate influence.
Right. Okay, now let's pivot a bit to the specific use of that robust platform. The second core objective mentioned is launching new financial primitives. Okay, this is where the jargon can feel a bit thick. If I'm prepping for a meeting or just trying to understand this, I need to know exactly what a primitive means here and what makes theirs new.
Okay, think about the most basic elements in traditional finance. Like, what are the fundamental building blocks? You've got a loan, collateral, a swap maybe, interest calculation. These are the simplest, most atomic components. The primitives, like if you're building a house, the primitive is the brick or the wooden beam.
Okay, basic building blocks. Got it.
On a blockchain, a primitive is essentially a smart contract that performs one of these basic financial functions. But the key here, as you said, is the word new. The platform isn't just designed to, say, tokenize existing assets or just recreate what a traditional bank already does.
So they're not just trying to put, like, a digital wrapper around an existing corporate bond or something.
Yeah, exactly. The design goal seems to be enabling foundational instruments that are simply, well, maybe not possible within the constraints of traditional finance. Because the platform's architecture allows for extreme customization, you could potentially design primitives for totally novel risk assessments, or maybe bespoke collateral types, or entirely new ways of doing collective governance, yield generation.
Could you give an example, like what might a new primitive look like that maybe traditional finance or even older blockchains would struggle with?
Well, you could imagine things like fully automated, non-custodial insurance protocols. That's one area. Or maybe highly tailored structured products where the risk parameters adjust automatically based on real-time on-chain data instead of needing a central manager. Another really important area is creating native liquid ways to represent complex assets. Think like tokenized real estate portfolios where the underlying contract handles dividend payouts and governance rights completely automatically.
Wow. Okay, that implies a pretty massive shift then. They're essentially providing the framework, the tools for engineers to invent the next generation of financial instruments, the kind that absolutely require that transparency and automation to even function correctly. It sounds like creating the ground layer for decentralized capital formation that goes way beyond just swapping crypto tokens.
It is, absolutely. But, and this is important, this also brings significant complexity. Whenever you launch new financial primitives, you're implicitly taking on a regulatory challenge. These tools often operate outside existing legal frameworks, right? And their very complexity means they might carry novel, maybe untested systemic risks. So the white paper, by using this specific language, is signaling really high technical ambition, but that's paired with, potentially high financial risk innovation too.
That makes sense. High risk, high reward, maybe. Okay, the final piece of this mission then, the capstone that kind of brings the whole ecosystem idea together, launching new interoperable blockchains. We've talked about the highly decentralized apps, the new financial primitives, but if they always exist on separate, isolated islands, the overall utility is limited, right? So what specific problem does prioritizing interoperability solve for Avalanche?
Yeah, the main problem interoperability tackles is fragmentation and scalability, actually. Historically, if one blockchain hit some kind of technical wall like its maximum transaction speed, the community basically had two choices. Either fork the chain, which splits the community, or rely on these complex, often less secure third-party bridges to move assets somewhere else. And that just creates a really inefficient, fragmented digital economy, like a bunch of walled gardens. Interoperability, especially the way Avalanche talks about it with their subnet model, means they're not trying to cram all functionality onto one single, potentially overburdened global chain. Instead, they're essentially building the plumbing, the connections, so that specialized sovereign chains can exist side by side. You might have one subnet dedicated purely to, say, high-speed financial trading, another one focused entirely on gaming NFTs. But the key is they can all communicate, share data, and transfer value between them natively, seamlessly.
Ah, okay. So it's not about building one giant monolithic chain to rule them all. It's more like building a coordination layer for countless specialized chains, the network of networks almost.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But here's the crucial question for you to think about. If you have lots of these specialized chains, these subnets, all potentially running different rule sets, how do you actually maintain that highly decentralized and secure nature across the entire platform? Doesn't pushing sovereignty out to individual chains risk creating, weak points in the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, that sounds like the classic security versus sovereignty dilemma, right?
Right.
If every subnet gets to customize its own gas fees, its own rules, maybe even its validator requirements, maintaining a unified security standard across the whole thing sounds like a huge technical challenge.
It is. It really is. And the solution, at least in their model, seems to lie in the security structure, relying on the primary network, the main chains, to guarantee that core security and consistency, while still granting those individual subnets the, let's call it, political and functional sovereignty to pick their own architecture, maybe even their own token economics. Interoperability is the mechanism that stops these distinct custom chains from just becoming isolated silos again. It ensures they can contribute to a larger unified economy. It's all about shared liquidity, shared user bases, which dramatically boosts the potential for scalability.
Okay, that makes the whole mission feel really comprehensive then. The platform is designed as this foundational framework, allowing many specialized talking chains to exist, hosting highly autonomous apps, and enabling fundamentally new financial tools. It really is an infrastructure play focused squarely on flexibility and resilience.
That seems to be the core idea presented.
Now, just to ground this, ambitious technical vision back into the day-to-day reality of the market, the source material we looked at also provided a quick snapshot, a context snapshot of the platform when that excerpt was captured.
That's right. Yeah, tucked right in there alongside these big foundational mission statements, these abstract engineering goals. The document included some specific real-world market numbers. It showed a valuation at that moment of $17.47 and mentioned a market change of 4.16%.
The inclusion of that is actually quite fascinating to me. Why would the architects of this foundational, presumably long-term technical vision feel the need to stick in highly volatile, immediate market data right into their core text? It almost seems to contradict the sort of permanence you'd expect from a mission statement.
I think it connects the abstract vision to the immediate financial reality, or perceived reality at the time. When someone reads a white paper, it's often not just computer scientists reading it, right? It's investors, developers trying to gauge viability, including market data, even just a snapshot like that. It grounds the theoretical, technical capability in some kind of realized financial evaluation. It's almost a way of saying, look, this system isn't just an academic thought experiment. It's already commanding a significant market presence. It's demonstrating momentum.
Yeah. It reminds us that while those three core pillars, the highly decentralized apps, the new primitives, the interoperability, while those are the timeless foundation, the platform still exists within a really dynamic, competitive financial world where, valuation matters.
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely. The technology is intended to be the engine driving value, and that market data point is like an immediate, real-time, albeit fleeting, reflection of the market's confidence in that engine at that specific moment. So if we try and synthesize all of this, what we've basically established is that Avalanche, judging purely by its foundational text, positions itself as an open source toolkit, one explicitly designed to tackle those classic blockchain trade-offs. Its three main pillars seem to be building resilient, highly autonomous apps, creating the fundamental components for future, possibly complex financial systems, and ensuring these systems don't end up isolated through deep interoperability.
so for you, the listener, perhaps the key takeaway here is how the platform defines itself. Not really by a single killer app, but by enabling these three massive coordinated shifts all at once: autonomous applications, foundational digital finance, and robust cross-chain communication. Those seem to be the explicit standards the project set for itself, and therefore how it should probably be measured. And thinking about that, since the white paper puts so much emphasis on the architecture needed to launch these new financial primitives, maybe the question for you to explore is this: as these digital building blocks get more sophisticated, what essential high-value financial service, maybe something related to trustless identity or complex risk modeling, what service can't really be adequately provided yet by the current primitives we have? And how might that specific gap be the thing that drives the next critical wave of innovation in this whole space? Something to think about.